Hi, it's Dan from Plant to Health. Today I want to talk about transitioning to a healthy diet, what are the challenges you might face, and how to tackle them. Coming up next. Transitioning to a healthy, whole food, plant-based diet can be challenging for people. And I like to divide those challenges to two broad categories: practical challenges and emotional or mental challenges. So let's talk about it. First of all, practical challenges. Number one, you want to create your environment so that it's supportive and conducive to your transition instead of an obstacle and a temptation. What that means is you want to remove, if possible, any kinds of foods that are not compliant, such as animal foods, processed foods, oils, and other fatty foods, and basically stock your kitchen with everything that you want to be included in your diet to avoid temptation. Now, while you may think that I'm strong enough to avoid temptation and I'm not going to be tempted to eat any of these foods, right now, or usually you are, but one day you'll be tired, you'll be stressed, and you might find yourself eating foods that are not good for you and will hurt your progress just because they're there. If you want to avoid them getting into your mouth, just keep them away from your environment if possible. And that leads to the second point, which is stocking your kitchen, your pantry, and your fridge with healthy ingredients, healthy foods to help yourself have accessible, healthy foods at all times. Your pantry should include things like, and I'm going to make an entire video about that, but just briefly, dried legumes such as beans, peas, lentils, chickpeas, and so on, as well as whole grains such as oats, rice, barley, quinoa, and so on. You want to be fully stocked with all the ingredients readily available, so also use canned legumes and veggies and so on. There's also frozen varieties of pre-cooked beans, peas, lentils, and grains, whole grains. Keep as many available so that you have healthy ingredients on hand and you'll be able to use them and cook readily. Which leads me to the next point, which is cooking. I know that's a sore point for some people. Here's the deal. You can't transition to a healthy diet without cooking. Now, you don't need to be a 5-star Michelin chef in order to succeed, but you do need to be able to cook at a basic level. The problem is that the outside world contains a toxic food environment, which tries to tempt you to eat all sorts of unhealthy foods in excessive quantities. You will need to be able to cook for yourself, or if you have someone cooking for you, great, but they need to be able to cook healthy foods for you so that you can eat healthy foods and make that transition. Well, yes, that needs to be taken into consideration. You need to be able to cook. At the early stages of the transition, you should focus on finding the kinds of foods and dishes that you like. So that might mean tweaking existing recipes that you already eat that are either mostly plant-based or plant-based, changing them a little bit, removing oil or removing other ingredients that are not compliant, processed foods, making them healthy dishes so that with minimal effort you already have things that you like to eat and that you're familiar with. So that's a good starting point. And of course, along the way you'll discover new and exciting dishes that you can make that will be healthy and compliant and will support your goal. Another important point is cooking without oil. I know it can sound challenging to some people, but it's actually pretty easy. Just give it a shot. All you need to do is just, wherever it says fry the onion, just add half a cup, somewhere between quarter of a cup and half a cup of water or veggie broth. Do that instead and it turns out just as well. And I'm telling you that based on experience. It's really easy to do. And just remove oils from anything that you would typically pour oil over. Obviously, don't fry because frying is extremely unhealthy, and you need to be wary of oils in all sorts of packaged foods, and obviously you should be minimizing your consumption of packaged foods that are not like single ingredient or something like really basic and simple, because those will typically be processed and contain oils and salt and sugar and all sorts of unhealthy ingredients which you don't want to be consuming. Which leads me to my next point, which is avoiding processed foods. Yes, you will need to ditch the processed foods. If you're going to transition to a healthy diet, obviously you can't consume processed foods, so you need to remove them. Next point, going out to the world. As basic as that sounds, as silly as it sounds, going out to the world is challenging because the food environment is toxic and will try to tempt you, and people will try to push food onto you, and people will offer food to you, and you'll be tempted by various foods that you see out there in the world. What you need to do is always be prepared. Yep, you need to take your food with you. That means carrying boxes of food with you wherever you go, whether it's to the office, whether you're going out for a few hours. Prepare, take a snack with you if it's only for a short while. If it's for a longer time, pack a lunch, pack a dinner, whatever you need. Make sure that you have healthy food available on hand and that you're not hungry out there. When you're hungry, you're going to make bad decisions, bad choices. You're going to be more tempted to eat things that are not conducive to your goals of transitioning. It'll be easier for you to slip and eat something that you didn't really want to, which you'll later regret. So always be prepared. Always take food with you, always take snacks with you so that you have healthy food available at all times. Part 2 of this, the emotional or mental side of things. Very complex, I know, not going to get into all of it, but we have to talk about it a little bit. Know your why. Before anything else, the fundamental starting point is knowing why you want to make this transition. Different people can have different motivations for switching to a whole food plant-based diet. They want to get healthy, they want to lose weight, they suffer from a chronic illness like type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, a variety of diseases where they can benefit greatly from transitioning to this kind of diet. It's really important that you know why. You need to know why to the level where you can say, oh, I want to be there for my family, or I want to be able to run around with my kids, I want to be able to lift up my grandchildren, I want to be able to, whatever. Every person has their motivation. You need to find yours. If you don't have a strong, solid why, you're much more likely to fail. You're much more likely to give up. You should really know why you're doing it before you start. That is one of the keys to success, absolutely. Next, peer pressure. People get offended. People expect you to eat. You will get peer pressure when you go out to the world, and you will be pressured to eat all sorts of foods that will hurt your progress and that you should not be eating. You might even be tempted by those foods because they're tasty and you like them. A few things that you can do is, first, going back to the first point, remember your why. Why are you doing this? What is your end goal here? What's the long game? You need to remember also that people who are offering you food might not necessarily understand your motivation for switching to a whole food plant-based diet and your reasons to wanting to be healthy. But at the end of the day, the food that you put in your mouth affects your health, affects your progress, affects the dopamine reward pathways in your brain, and it will determine whether you succeed or not, ultimately. Those people are not putting, well, they're not investing in their health necessarily. That food is not going in their mouths, it's going in your mouth. So you should have the ultimate say about what goes into your body. Have the strength to withstand peer pressure from people. You can always say something like, you know, I'm trying this new diet, I want to get healthy, I've been doing this because I want to XYZ, whatever, I want to lose weight. You can also say, hey, you know, I've already eaten, I'm full. You can use an excuse like, oh, you know, my stomach is acting up, or, you know, make up some excuse that people will just readily accept and back off. There's all sorts of ways to handle it, but at the end of the day, you need to remember that whatever you choose, it only affects you. It doesn't affect those other people, and it directly affects you and your health. So keep that in mind. Social events. Yeah, you will be invited, hopefully, to all sorts of social events. Those are tricky, and some of them will revolve around food. When possible, if you can avoid situations where it strictly revolves around food, like a dinner or a restaurant, then great. If not, if it's a dinner or something that's centered around food, you can always bring your own food, prepare a nice dish, and share it with the table, and that way you'll have something healthy to eat. You can also explain why you made this kind of dish and what you're doing, how you're changing your diet and you're trying to get healthy without getting into too much detail. Another good idea is, if it's some sort of event where it's not strictly centered around food, is to adopt the practice of getting there when you're full. So eat before you leave the house. When you get to the event, you're full. That way there's no temptation to eat things that would hurt your progress or unhealthy foods because you're full. And when you're full, it's much easier to resist temptations and basically just to enjoy yourself without eating. A last point, which is important, is food addictions. Now, as someone who is pretty much convinced that they are a recovering food addict, I can understand that that adds a layer of difficulty to all of this. You will need to deal with more. It's more of a challenge. However, you need to remember that by staying away from these hyper-palatable, hyper-rich foods, you're actually training your dopamine reward center to upregulate the dopamine receptors and return gradually to a normal state where you're not overstimulating the system. Actually, if you're able to stick to the diet for at least 30 days, you will already feel different and better and much more in control because you have actually changed the sensitivity of your system, sort of dragged yourself that little bit out of the food addiction cycle. It would be more challenging at first. You would need to maybe find a way to sort of avoid social events and other kinds of events where you might be tempted, or the kind of scenarios where you might be tempted, and sort of try and shy away from those things for a while until you've managed to quiet down those food addictions, because they do quiet down. I can tell you that from my own experience. They really subside over time. You start to enjoy eating healthy food. So until next time, like, subscribe, share the video if you've enjoyed it, and share it with other people. Remember, eat whole plant foods. You only stand to lose the weight, the diabetes, the heart disease, and I'll see you next time.